Sadnam, yogis and yoginis. Hello, welcome back to one more session of this mantra course. We have a very exciting topic today. Well, not that every day is not exciting. Every day is exciting regarding mantras, or at least that's what I like to share. But today we have something that doesn't come necessarily from mantra yoga, but actually comes from Yogi Bhajan, and when he talked about the mantras, and particularly what he calls the science of Nat yoga. Yeah, Nat yoga being the yoga of sound, and how when we are chanting and when we're speaking, there is a whole science about what is happening within our mouth and our brains that makes it so that some particular sounds have that effect on our consciousness and some other sounds do not. We were exploring in some other sessions back from this course the difference between chanting like Coca-Cola and a mantra, yeah? And we can feel it, but why is it so? And what's happening within us when we are chanting mantras? So Yogi Bhajan brings a very interesting perspective to this, saying that there is actually 84 points in the upper palate, and as the tongue is touching those points, there is a stimulation that is going to our hypothalamus in the brain, and that's having an effect on the brain. And so these points are all situated around the upper palate, but we know that different languages have different areas that are more stimulated than others. No, so if we listen to a German person speaking, then the language that they speak has some strong emphasis on some sounds, and some other sounds are not very strong compared to maybe Spanish or British English, right? Or Sanskrit, right? Or Gurumukhi. So different languages stimulate different points, and that would mean that particular language that we speak is stimulating the brain in a particular way. And that would explain how there is a certain German characteristics to their personality, and there is some particular characteristics to the personality of Spanish people and English people, right? In general, yeah? Then within the very same language, there could be variations like, British English or American English, or if you listen to somebody from Wales or from Scotland, they vary in the accent and they vary in the personality. So the suggestion is that the accent changes the way you touch the upper points, and that is changing the way you think. And this is interesting also because anyone who has studied more than one language, or who is bilingual or trilingual, they will realize how different it is to think in one language or think in another. I remember having a particular situation and trying to decide what am I going to do. If I'm thinking in Spanish, I may arrive to a different conclusion than if I'm thinking in Catalan or English or Portuguese or some other, I don't know too many languages, but these languages, they change the way in which I am thinking. So when I am reflecting upon it, the brain goes through a different line of thought than if you choose one language or I choose another. So please feel welcome to check this and try it out. And the very interesting thing that happens as well is that when you are learning a new language, you are actually learning how to think as the people from that country, yeah, the language that you are speaking. So it may happen that maybe you don't understand too much why, let's say, Russians think that way. Yeah, the Russian mentality. You want to understand it better. Inevitably, you may want to learn their language. And as you are learning to speak the language and pronouncing their words, you're starting to understand better why they think in that way. And not only that, but you start to think in that way as well, especially when you're thinking in that language. So learning a new language actually is not just about having access to their texts, which are going to tell me more about them than translations of those actual texts, but seeing the original. Not only that, but also by reading the original, I'm going to start thinking that way. So that's very interesting. So when we are chanting the mantras, we are stimulating the points in the same way that the yogis who created or who heard these sounds, the same way that they were doing it. So we are stimulating the brain in a particular way. Yeah, so if we are chanting a particular mantra, that mantra, let's say we are doing like the Kirtan Kriya Satanama, Satanama, that's going to be stimulating the points very precisely in a particular order with a certain particular rhythm, and that's going to have an effect on our brain and on our consciousness. And that there is a science to that, behind that. And that's what is called the science of not yoga. It's like a technology, yeah? Okay, so, all right, where are these points? Yeah, we want to know, what about these points? How are they in the mouth? And it would be interesting to find out. So, as I began this research on the points, I first started reading the description that is in the level 1 manual for Kundalini Yoga teachers. And it's very basic, this description, and to me it seems incomplete. 32 pairs of points, 64 points, are located on the hard palate. 4 points with each tooth. The other 20 points are located in a curve or U-shape in the central part of the palate with 10 points along each side. The location of these points are not exactly the same for each person since the palate shapes vary, but the general curve pattern is universal. Okay, so 64 points are along the teeth, but in like every tooth has 2 pairs of points, so 4 points. But how is that? I mean, one tooth is like this and it's like 2 points and 2 points, or is it like 4 points like this, or is it 4 points like this? It was not clear from this description what it was. So I did a little bit of research on that, and I came upon different diagrams which would actually be in conflict with each other. So I'm going to show one of the diagrams. This is from, I'm covering something up, I will show you later. This is from David Chandahov's book. I think, I'm actually not 100% sure because I saw it online, but I think this is the Sacred Therapist book. And he shows it like this. And this diagram definitely is not coherent, or is not the same as the description that we just heard, because this has 25 points on each side of this in the roof of the palate, and then only, I think it was like 32 points here, so it's 2 points per tooth, and then 2 points more in the middle. That's very strange. That doesn't look at all like what Yogi Bhajan described in the other lecture. So this is kind of confusing. I don't know why this diagram is like this, and I would be very interested to have a conversation with Dr. Chandahov to find out where does this come from, because there may be something that we are missing. And there's something very interesting here as well, but maybe I'll come back to it later. And then there is another diagram, and this is from Ardaas Singh, and I think the title of the book is just Kundalini Yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan, but in Spanish, tal y como lo enseñó Yogi Bhajan. Yeah, and this diagram does follow much more the idea of what Yogi Bhajan was describing, with 4 points for each tooth. So it's 2 pairs of points, but all in one line. Initially, I thought it was like 2 and 2, 2 and 2, but actually this also makes sense. So I wasn't sure which of the both versions could be possible, right? But it's not 100% sure. You don't know, because the description it was ambiguous. So I looked in the library of teachings and I found another lecture in which a student was asking, like, how are the points located? And he says, well, Satkar Tarkor has all the notes, ask her in the video, yeah? And I was like, okay, but where is Satkar Tarkor? So I contacted KRI and I asked whether I could get these notes. And I got notes. I don't know if it's the same Satkar Tarkor, it may be a different Satkar Tarkor, because there's a few. But these are the notes from Satkar Tarkor from Holland, from 1978, where Yogi Bhajan did a course which was called a Nat Yoga course. I am very grateful to her for sharing these notes, and so that we can now be more clear about what Yogi Bhajan was talking about. So let me share this with you. And I will just, this is the description, this is the notes of the course taken by her. And she's talking about the diagram. I will show you the diagram in one moment. And she describes like a small sushumna can be seen running in the middle of the tongue. I think it will be better if I show the diagram. So let's see. So here's the original drawing, the original diagram of Yogi Bhajan in this Nat Yoga course. And this is a drawing of the tongue. And he says, look, it looks like the infinite. And there is a sushumna running in the middle. And I talked about this, how the tongue has the different sides of the tongue and the central channel of the tongue in another video where I talk about the Kundalini Yoga Upanishads and the Kechari Mudra. That video is particularly important for what we are going to talk today. So if you haven't watched it, I recommend that you go and watch that video. I put a link here for you to click on. Because it also talks about some things, in that video we talk about something that is going to come up here today as well. And this thing that the Sushumna is through the middle of the tongue, that Yogi Bhajan talked about this in this lecture. So, he says, the interaction of the tongue and the upper palate have a tremendous effect on the development of the human personality, psyche, and character, what we were just talking about. There are 84 meridian points located along the upper palate, and there are 32 pairs of points located along the upper teeth. 4 points are located in front of each tooth, thus forming a continuous line of points running around the inside of the upper teeth. Now, in this original diagram, it's a bit confusing as well, because here he draws, this is one tooth, this is another tooth, and here in the small letters there is like 32 in grooves between the teeth. So it could be understood that there is 4 points like this here, tung 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 tung. I don't know. That doesn't. That it's also conflicting with the other notes that we have from him. So this particular comment, it's confusing. We don't know exactly what he meant by that, but he clearly said a continuous line of points, which seems. Which makes sense to look at it the way Guru Das draws it here. So it's 4 points, 4 points, 4 points in a continuous line around the upper palate. My understanding is that makes more sense than actually putting these points here between the teeth, because then how are these points being stimulated? The tongue touches here but doesn't touch between the teeth. So I'm not sure about these grooves that he means, because he never really drew every point and did a diagram, except this. This is the closest he came to drawing it, and we can see here these points like this, which seems to imply that they are like tick 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 along like this, but it's not clear. It's not 100% clear. Then he says, the other 20 points are located in a curved or U shape inside the other 64 points. That's what he draws like here, 10 pairs of points. Yeah? And the whole tongue, not just the tip, stimulates the points. The meridian points of the upper palate cannot be mapped or charted like acupuncture points. So he says that we cannot just say, this point affects the liver in that way. It doesn't work that way. These points don't work that way. What he says is that these points, as the tongue is stimulating these points, they stimulate the hypothalamus, and that's connected to the pituitary and pineal glands. So let's say there are 2 points behind one tooth, corresponding, for example, to the testicles. That would be testicle 1 or T1 and testicle 2 or T2. And something like that. Imagine one next to one tooth, there would be these 2 points, and there would be T1 and T2, and that would be like he mentions, these pairs relate to the two parts of the hypothalamus. So that's this drawing here. So this is the 84 points in the upper palate, the tongue touching them, and the stimulation going to the hypothalamus. This is the hypothalamus. So this is very, very, very interesting, but some things are a little bit confusing. I'm gonna show you the drawings I have made that are the clearest that I can to reflect this. So now seeing the diagram from Yogi Bhajan, we see that this doesn't make sense with this, doesn't correspond with Shanahov's diagram. So I don't know about this. We see that it's so much more clear with this drawing. It makes much more sense, yeah? The 64 on the outside, the 10 and the 10 in the inside with a curved shape, which, if the tongue is stimulating it, you can see almost the shape of the tongue here. When the tongue is touching the upper palate, there is some sounds, which is ter, 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 the tongue going up, sounds which are predominantly more in Sanskrit or Gurmukhi than in Spanish. In Spanish, we don't have those sounds, which would mean that in Spanish, we don't stimulate those points at all. And that's going to have an effect. Well, that's interesting. I would like to know more about that. Yeah? Okay, so taking this drawing, I just cleaned it a little bit, and I made my own drawing to imagine that as if we were looking at the upper palate from below, yeah? In this way. So it's turning this around, because it's better to see it like this when we are going to look at the effects that it has on the body, the different points that are being stimulated. So this is the drawing that I do for to find where the points are in the upper palate. This would be the hard part of the upper palate. This would be the softest one. It has two sides. And then as these points are being stimulated, this is another drawing I did to try to reflect this thing here. Let's take only 2 points, which is simplistic because the tongue doesn't really touch 2 points, it touches more than 2. But let's just say when we are stimulating only 2 points, maybe we are doing hada, 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 and the tip of the tongue, hada, that little touching would be touching 2 points, and those 2 points, there is some energy or some stimulation through these meridians going to the hypothalamus, and here there would be something happening. And again, I would just try to make it more clear with this drawing. So the 2 points being touched would come here. This would have a stimulation on the hypothalamus, which he mentions there is an anterior and a posterior part of the hypothalamus, which correspond to the anterior and posterior side of the pituitary being stimulated. And then from there also to the pineal. So it would be sending instructions to the pituitary and the pineal, and have a direct effect on the hypothalamus, which is very associated with some aspects of our personality. This is the closest I can do to follow what Yogi Bhajan was saying, because as far as I know, I've never seen an actual diagram like this drawn by Yogi Bhajan. This is the closest thing we have, as far as I know. And he never said, like, this point is for the liver, this point is for the kidney, this point is for the whatever. And he actually says that the points cannot be mapped like traditional acupuncture. So we are left wondering, what are the effects of the stimulation of these different points? And we don't have an answer to that, unfortunately. I would love to know, but we don't have it. So this is as far as what Yogi Bhajan gave us. And what comes afterwards, everything that comes from here, is my speculation and my understanding from what I learned from Mantra Yoga. So, before I explore that, I did find this Neuro-Focal Odontology, which talks about how every tooth can be connected to some organs. Now, I don't know anything about Neuro-Focal Odontology. I tried to find more information. There is not a lot on the internet on this. But here are some organs associated to the teeth. And what I do identify is there is a certain order to these organs, which I believe it follows some traditional Chinese medicine, this particular order. So this is probably connected to that. Probably if somebody studied naturopathy and you know more about this, please let us know in the comments if you know more about this, or if you have a drawing by Yogi Bhajan where he actually explains every point what it stimulates. I would very much like to know, and so it would benefit the whole community. Now, at these points, I believe this is much more. This is not about some points that are stimulated and they go to this, but it's more like a direct association between the teeth and the organs. It's more about the teeth more than the upper palate. It's not connected to language. So I'm not going to take this as a reference. I'm just going to keep it here like it's interesting, but I'm not going to have this as a reference for the research that I do afterwards. Now, there is one more point that I want to point out, which is something interesting in the Scharnhorst diagram. I mentioned that there was something interesting here, which is this point in the middle, particular this point. Now, where does this come from? I would love for David Scharnhorst to explain us where is this coming from. And but to me, why is this point interesting? Because in that video I mentioned before on the Kundalini Upanishad, where I talk about the Kechari Mudra and how Kechari Mudra is it's a very advanced practice that we don't do nowadays. We don't cut the tongue at all. And the alternative to that mudra would be to press the tongue in the upper palate. And I mentioned how there is many meditations by Yogi Bhajan in which we have to do so, pressing the upper tip of the tongue in the upper palate. And we talked a little bit about that in the video. There's one thing I didn't mention because it was not so relevant to that video particularly, but that point in the upper palate, that's a very interesting point. It's called the hard to soft palate junction. Palate, like the upper palate. Junction is like the union. Hard and soft. HSPJ. So here we have some drawings. This is from the internet. I don't have the source. Sorry. So all the credit to whoever created these drawings. Yeah. So hard soft palate junction. And this is a very interesting point. What I was suggesting in that video was that we press the tip of the tongue in the upper palate when we are not doing anything, just to keep the flow of the energy within us. This is something recommended from various traditions, and we certainly have a lot of indications from Kundalini Yoga that that's recommended for us. That would be a good thing to do, to keep the tongue in the upper palate. Now, curiously, that point is very significant for babies because that's where the tip of the breast touches. So as the baby is drinking, I have a description here. Let's see. I was interested about this when I had my first daughter. I wanted to know how does the tongue work for her to be able to drink milk. She was having a little bit of problems, so I was trying to find information on this, and I came upon very interesting description. This is from tongue tie and frenotomy in the breastfeeding newborn by Isabella Knox, and she starts to explain how it's done. So protrude over the alveolar ridge to inhibit the bite reflex, assist the flank lips, blah, blah, blah. And says, note the depth of the nipple tip and its proximity to the hard, soft palate junction. Palate junction, yeah? So very, very interesting. And then through the contraction of the muscles of the tongue, then it's like creating vacuum, which results in the milk flow. Now, the tongue is stimulating the milk flow, creating vacuum, and the point is being stimulated. Now, that's very soothing and for the child because he's receiving the milk from the mom and is the connection to the mother. So that's a very, very, a lot of psychological and energetic things are happening right there, yeah, during the breastfeeding. And as the child is young, sometimes in a situation of stress, the child will suck the thumb. And when they are sucking the thumb is having exactly the same position as the tip of the nipple. So what the baby is doing is creating the same kind of a stimulus in the upper palate. I find it very interesting that if we do If we do this, if we put the upper tip of the tongue in this point between the hard and the soft palate, we are stimulating the same points that we were stimulating as when we were babies. And that's interesting because it creates a flow of energy within us. It has nothing to do with milk anymore, but there is a flow of energy that is happening within us. And I was associating this to the effect that is happening when you are doing Kechari Mudra. And then if you look in Kechari Mudra, this is something I didn't mention in that video as well, but it makes sense to mention it now, that there is a particular chakra, a small chakra, that it is associated to Kechari Mudra, and it's called Lalana Chakra. And I'm going to read here what the wiki says on Lalana Chakra. It says it's closely related to Vishuddha because it's close to the throat, and the throat regulates the chakras around this area. Located in the roof of the mouth, it's called Lalana. It's described to have 12 red or white petals, and they correspond to a number of virtues. Inside is a red circular moon, which acts as a reservoir for the nectar Amrit. If you have watched that video, you will remember that I mentioned how the Amrit drips from the Bindu point. And now we are reading here that it has a moon as well. So connecting to the previous video we did on the Om, which we were seeing the Om, the Chandra, and the Bindu, this symbol, Om, is actually describing what's happening with the Bindu, releasing this Amrit and coming into the moon. Moon has the shape of collecting the Amrit, and that is in the upper palate. Do you get that? I find it incredible, right? That the symbol of the Om describes the Bindu and the Chandra collecting the Bindu, like the Amrit is dropping from the Bindu point. This is the Bindu, where sometimes we tie our hair, depending if in the Kundalini Yoga tradition, men or women tie it in different points, but in the classical yoga tradition, everybody would tie it here. And then as the energy is coming, this Amrit is coming down, there is something happening in the upper palate. And this stimulation of this Lalana chakra would be so interesting that is connected to Amrit in this way. Now, remember, the upper palate is where we are touching with the tip of the tongue. So that's significant. And then when Vishuddha is inactive, the nectar runs downwards to Manipura and is consumed, resulting in physical degeneration. Because in the other video I mentioned, it contains both the poison and the juice of eternal life, yeah? Through practices such as Kechari Mudra, and we suggest the tip of the tongue in the upper palate. And when I say upper palate, now I mean the hard-soft palate junction, HSPJ. When you are practicing that, however, the nectar can be made to enter Vishuddha, which is purified and becomes a nectar of immortality. Remember, Vishuddha is color blue, and the symbolism would be Krishna, all the skin being blue, because he has purified the Amrit, because he has opened Vishuddha. There it is. Finally, we are putting pieces of the puzzle together. It took a while from the time of the first video on this Kundalini Upanishads. It needed time to reflect upon the hard-soft palate junction and the upper palate and the meridians in the upper palate and what is this Amrit. And now we are starting to put many pieces together to have a better idea of what's happening. All this together with the microcosm, a macrocosm, the circles, the cycles of the energy within us. I find it fascinating. So I hope you did it as well. I hope you found it interesting. We're not going to start sucking our thumbs, but maybe per tongue in the upper palate, that would be certainly something recommended to do. And all right, this is what we can understand from what Yogi Bhajan was talking about on the upper palate and the science of Nat Yoga. As I said, there is no more clear distinction of what each point does. However, we do know how to pronounce the sounds in Gurumukhi and Sanskrit, and we know where the tongue touches when we do those sounds. Therefore, we can extrapolate what is the stimulation of those points. That's coming up in the following video. Don't miss it out. I think it will be now when we are going to start seeing how that's affecting different parts of the body beyond what we were seeing in the semi-vowels. And we're going to go into the consonants, finally. And it will be the last piece of the puzzle for the mantra chanting, but it will take a few videos probably as well. So until then, hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and join us in the next one. Sadam.